Together, eliminating poverty, embracing justice, peace, and togetherness. The Global View on Q. Networking Dominica with the rest of the world. The experts are in the house. From Dominica, Canada, the Caribbean, the United States, Europe, Asia, and the rest of the world. Engaging all Dominicans at home and abroad on our agriculture, our economy, our foreign relations, our justice system, our governance, our international competitiveness, our education, our world-class festivals and entertainment, sports, politics, regional cooperation, and much more. Globally positioning Dominica within the Caribbean. Join the conversation on the Global View on Q. Tune in, call us, have your say. The Global View on Q, only on Q95, the big station.
Good evening to you at home or in your vehicle, or if you are on the road or at work or listening on the radio or on the internet in Dominica or abroad. Thank you so much for choosing Q95. This is the Global View on Q. A very, very warm welcome to all of our Q family listeners at home and globally. I'm Sheridan Gregoire, Mr. G. It's Tuesday, 7th October 2025, the 38th Tuesday of 2025, and it's just about 8:02 p.m. in the studios at Q95, the big station. We're live on our radio frequencies on QTV. Please follow us on Facebook and on YouTube at Q95 FM Radio. Share the live, like our pages. Our on-air phone numbers are on the homepage of our website at www.q95da.com. Get the latest breaking news and reviews on Q95 because you know it's true if you hear it on Q. We continue to revive the spirit of graciousness, love, peace, prosperity, and unity among our Kalinago and Afro Caribbean brothers and sisters. It is our 38th Global View on Q show for 2025, and we continue to engage with our local, regional, and global Q family listeners and friends of Dominica at home and abroad. My co-host is Justice Dr. Irving Andre, and our guests tonight are former Ambassador Crispin Gregoire and well-known attorney Gabriel Christian. Tonight we discuss the recent African Union Caribbean Community Summit, and we will focus on Dominica's long-standing call for a closer partnership with the African continent. From Edward LeBlanc to Rosie Douglas to Gabriel Christian to Irving Andre to Ron Green to Crispin Gregoire to Ras Kabinda, formerly known as Desmond Trotter, and other past Dominican leaders in the Black Power movement. So I have some suggestions about the areas to be explored tonight. But first, the African Caribbean Unity Summit. Is it lip service or is it a laudable goal? What about cooperation with Western Sahara versus a Morocco hotel built in a swamp and questionable fertilizer deals while the young people in Morocco protest against the regime in office? And we have real economic and trade ventures and build on progress in economic cooperation from initiatives like the Afrexim Bank in Barbados and the Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum. Can Dominica attract sustainable investments from the African continent? What about opportunities for investments in agro industries such as cassava processing and trade? What about Dominica music industry exports, cadence, buyo, calypso, etc., to the African continent? And what about cooperation in healthcare with Nigerian doctors instead of working with people like Maduke? Can we explore ethnicity connections with Africa, like Nigeria, Algeria, Dominica relations, which can prompt tourism from Nigeria and Algeria, for example, considering Dominica International Airport is on the horizon? What about attracting African investments in a Dominica water industry for exports? And what about partnering with the African continent to demand reparations from former colonial powers for the lasting negative impacts of the slave trade and colonialism? So, as I always say, thinking forward towards 2028 or to Dominica's 50th anniversary of independence, what are the people's expectations for their well being? Are they satisfied with their current conditions and lack of economic and social progress? We look forward to the suggestions of our panel, our listeners, callers, and viewers on Facebook and YouTube on the recent African Union Caribbean Community Summit. with a focus on the Dominica's long-standing call for a closer partnership with the African continent, from Edward LeBlanc to Rosie Douglas to Gabriel Christian to Irving Andre to Ron Green to Crispin Gregoire to Ras Kabinda, formerly known as Desmond Trotter, and other past Dominican leaders in the Black Power movement, and what needs to be done to move beyond these 25 years of economic stagnation and oppression. Justice Dr. Irving Andre, former Ambassador Crispin Gregoire, and Attorney Gabriel Christian will share their ideas on this topic ahead of our 50th anniversary of independence. So as usual, we invite you, our Q family and friends of Dominica, to help us give our usual huge shout out and big thank you to our farmers, our healthcare providers, our frontline workers, our police and fire officers, our teachers and doctors and nurses and public and private sector patriots and friends of Dominica at home and abroad. And as I always say, we welcome each and every Dominican and friend of Dominica to the Global View on Q. We embrace you wherever you are, in every nook and cranny, in every village, in every community at home, in Dominica, in the region, and globally. Thank you, Sherwin, keeping us on the air. Thank you, Lambi, on the console, directing the traffic as usual. We will take your calls. As you know, the people's voice is always a priority on Q and on the Global View on Q. So call us anytime during the program, and Lambi will signal us when you call. My co-hosts and guest panelists will expand and deliver on their own ideas on this topic tonight. So I go now to Justice Dr. Irving Andre for his opening comments on this topic, the recent African Union Caribbean Community Summit, with a focus on Dominica's long-standing call for a closer partnership with the African continent. So let's get the ball rolling, Dr. Andre. I believe you're muted.
Let me thank you for inviting my fellow panelists, esteemed I should say, and myself to this August gathering of likable or like-thinking persons. Let me thank your listenership for taking time off to listening to someone who is somewhat declining into dotage, if I may say so myself. This whole topic is very important. Obviously, we have strong historical ties to the African continent. We are bound at the hip through the torturous and painful history of slavery. Our roots are in the continent, and no amount of progress, development, no amount of peddling of passports can sever those roots. We in Dominica, we have a long history of involvement in the continent, a history which is very positive, a history which we can be proud of. But the question is always, what efforts have we made to ensure that the younger generation is aware of that history? Again, I made reference to slavery. In the late 19th century, on about 1898, 99 or thereabouts, or 1900, there's a great Dominican. His last name is Christian. I don't know if he's related to Gabriel, but he studied law in England, and he went to the continent, and I think he settled in Ghana, and I think he made such a huge impact on the body politic in that country that he is regarded as an icon, written about in history, local histories, in accounts of the development of the law in Africa. And we're talking about a Dominican, but not only are we talking about a Dominican, we're talking about a Dominican who had very humble beginnings in St. Joseph, if my memory serves me right, at a time when 99% of Dominicans could not even go to the Dominican Grammar School, which was founded in 1893. This guy has the resources or the single-mindedness or determination to sell in produce, to go to England and study law and make a great name for himself in Ghana, if my memory serves me correct. But following that, again, in various walks of life, in various fields, many Dominicans have established made significant contributions. Many West Indians, for example, in the early 20th century, No one can forget the work of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who preached the gospel of repatriation, of reclaiming our heritage, and stop trying to mimic our colonizers. We had the great George Padmore. We had the great C.L.R. James, who wrote a number of wonderful books, including one on Kwame Nkrumah and the history of the Ghanaian Revolution. We also had the work of someone called Rosie Douglas, who did not contribute as much on a theoretical level as some people like C.L.R. James, George Padmore, and so on, but certainly in terms of his work in the Libyan Mathaba, in terms of his assistance to liberation struggles, not only in Africa, but also in South America, his contribution is not exceeded by anyone in living memory. We also had the great Martinican poet and theoretician, Aimé Césaire. So they have all made significant contributions to the to Africa, and cemented those ties, which in my view today are almost absent. But not only that, in terms of Dominica's contributions, we've also had a significant number of, in addition to Christian, who I just made mention of, in the later decades of the 20th century, we've had a number of Dominican lawyers who served with great distinction as jurists in Africa. Seminal among them, obviously, the great Telford Georges, who at one point, was Chief Justice of Tanzania. We also have Cozy Harris, studied law in Canada, and who became a senior judge in the Cameroons, if my memory serves me right. We also have Justice Ashton Piper, who served for over 2 decades in Nigeria. And I believe we had the late President Nick Liverpool, who certainly was involved on a very professional level for a shorter period of time in Africa. But in addition to that, we also had a great number of theoreticians in the ilk of Ron Green, who, if I recall correctly, taught at a university in Africa for some time. Bernard Wilshire also did the same. And obviously we have Ras Kabinda, who is now in Ethiopia, and who certainly made a contribution in terms of his contribution to Rastafarian philosophy and Rastafarian way of life. So we have this foundation of involvement in Africa on different levels, whether with respect to the legal contribution, whether it's with respect to the works of some of our educators, whether it's with respect to actual physical help to liberation struggles in Africa, epitomized by the work of Rosie Douglas. So the question is now, where are we, given that proud history of involvement in the motherland? Where are we as an island? The question is, where are we in 2025, at a time when many African countries, such as Benin, for example, such as Ghana, for example, they have embarked on aggressive programs to cater or to promote cultural or historical tourism. They have geared a number of tourism products to attracting African Americans or persons in the diaspora to return and to learn your history and even to live. In fact, Benin, quite frankly, is actually offering citizenship if one meets certain criteria. Persons whose ancestry can be traced to Benin. Benin is using that as a kind of as part of a policy to get persons in the diaspora to come home and make a contribution, to invest and to reclaim their heritage, as it were. So it is within that context that we have to look at this attempt, this summit, this African West Caribbean summit, and we have to ask ourselves critically, to what extent does it build upon that rich heritage of connection, of return, of investment made by West Indians, particularly Dominicans, over decades. To what extent? Because first of all, if we look at Dominica itself, I mean, didn't recently we were telling the Americans, guys, don't send the Palestinians over, you just have to pay us some money. What about the tens of thousands of people in the Sudan facing economic hardship? In various parts of Africa, Mali, have we ever even thought of making any type of gesture, invitation to those with whom we have such great affinities of race, of history, of culture? What about a country called Haiti? What is our policy with respect to having Haitians in Dominica? Do we charge them a head tax? Really? Do we charge them a head tax and fail to return that head tax to them? You know better than I. You will answer that question, not me. So whereas we have, on one hand, we have this rich history of altruism, of generosity, of contribution to real development. On the other hand, in the modern era, or the modern manifestation of that linkage to Africa, it is based on economics. It is based on self-interest. What we can get, not what we can do to develop those linkages, not what we can do to market some of our produce, if in fact market exists in Africa, not what we can do to try to assist these countries in some way or the other, in some fashion or the other. So this is the sad state of affairs that we now face in 2025, that we have essentially, in my view, jettisoned that rich history of contribution to the motherland, and we have unfortunately pursued policies that basically amounts to a negation of any links we have with the African heartland. And the question is, how does that advance our future as a democratic, proud democratic community, which glorifies its past, which looks forward with confidence to its future and to a celebration of its 50th anniversary? To what extent have we shown that we are ready to take our place as a proud nation, a nation with a particular history that we are proud of, a nation which is proud of the contributions of this small country by nationals going back to the 19th century? Have we built upon that legacy, or have we, quite frankly, just trampled upon it? That is the question, in my respectful view.
And thank you so much for this, Irvin. Lam, do you have a call? No, okay. Brother Gabe, I go to you now because not only do you have family ties in terms of nationals who really went to Africa and did meaningful contributions there, but you have maintained a connection with the African continent at a very high level. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, first of all, a blessed good evening to you, Brother Sheridan, former president of the Guild of Graduates at the University of West Indies, St. Augustine, in the time of Black Power. A blessed evening to Brother Irving, also known as Washoba Wakanda. It's not very well known that Brother Irving was once known in the struggle with his
right? I didn't know that name.
That's right. That's the underground. You know, we're in the Harriet, we're in the underground.
Okay.
I be a witness to a towering figure of Pan-Africanism in our midst, His Excellency Ambassador Crispin Gregoire, who not only worked in Africa, but married an African. Well, he married two Africans, one in Panama, removed, and the other one from Africa directly, and who also had outstanding relations with Algeria, which was the refuge, not only for the Black Panther Party, but also for the African Liberation Movement, like Frelimo and like the ANC. I be a witness to Brother Lambie, who, as a child, I remember himself, if Brother Lambie, my memory serves me right, I may not have remembered you in the particular dashiki that you're not wearing now, although it looks like you have one on. But I remember you as one of the strong supporters of the Black Power movement as well. And Brother Sherwin, who was not born at the time, I suspect. But it brings me high honor and privilege to be in the auspicious company of Dominicans. And I want to say how much every day I feel that we as Dominicans are blessed. We're so blessed. But we do not know that from the midst, from the bosom of our country, has arisen some of the greatest Pan-Africanists in human history. I didn't know until COVID that Ruzi Douglas of Dominica was the co-chair of the Black Writers Conference, which on Wikipedia, mind you, Wikipedia notes it as the largest Black Power conference in human history outside the United States. Ruzi Douglas of Dominica. But it goes beyond, before that. George James Christian, our granduncle, who went to Ghana in 1902 and whose daughter, Maud Foster, was the first Ghanaian female attorney of Dominican heritage. And Estella Pierre, who drafted the laws of Ghana, who came to the University of the West Indies and who was on Q95 in 2017. Irving was there. George James Christian of Dominica and the Gold Coast, who provided, as Irving said, the operating table for the Old Rosa Hospital, whose agent in Dominica was one J.B. Charles. J.B. Charles, as most people don't know, was an affiliate of Marcus Garvey and arranged with J. Ralph Casimir to bring Marcus Garvey here on October 30th, 1937, where Marcus Garvey gave a speech at Coronation Hall, organized by J. Ralph Casimir of Dominica, saying that Negroes, you must free your mind. And if you free your mind, then everything will be open to you. And then, of course, Bob Marley told us about liberate yourself from mental slavery. Own yourself and free your mind. Dominicans, listen carefully to this. It was Sheridan Gregoire and Lambie, aided and abetted by one Sherwin, who several years ago had on this program one Dr. Leonard Jeffries of City College of New York and Robert Smalls, Professor Robert Smalls. When I called Dr. Smalls and I said to him, sir, I saw a clip of you speaking somewhere about African liberation and Pan-Africanism. I said, let me call you. And he said, where are you from? I hear an accent. And I said, I'm from Dominica. And he said, Dominica? I said, yes, not the Dominican Republic. He said, I know. He said, Dominica is the land of Edward Scobie, who was our teacher and mentor. Edward Scobie of the Dominica Grammar School was the professor of Black Studies who mentored Leonard Jeffries, the great Leonard Jeffries and Robert Smalls. And they were so impressed that they made it possible to be on Q95 to speak about that legacy. So we have to understand that we are people of high intelligence. Irving Andre, Crispin Gregoire, yourself, Sheridan, don't pull yourself out of it. Ruzi Douglas, I met a gentleman from the ANC in Washington. And when he heard where I was from, he said, what about Ruzi Douglas? He was from an island called Dominica. Was it Dominica or the Dominican Republic? I think it was Dominica. I said, Dominica. He said, where is he? I said, he's passed away. The gentleman wept. He said, Ruzi Douglas used to come to them in the camps in Angola. And I told Irving, a guy called Ari Ben Menache from Montreal, who was a Mossad agent, who said he used to help Ruzi get the guns and the boots and the food for the guerrilla fighters of Umkhonto we Sizwe. So Dominicans have made measurable contributions to African liberation. But in this moment, we must understand that to further the cause of African liberation, we have to focus on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That is our program now with Ethiopian Airlines and Ethiopian Airlines University. We have a St. Mary's Academy graduate as one of the senior pilots. Of the 18,000 Ethiopian Airlines employees, he was in the top 25. He was number 24 last year, flying all their planes out in Ethiopia. And they are ready to work with us in the Caribbean and in the African diaspora at large to train our people. So those are the partnerships we want to see. It is not enough to put a dashiki. Now tonight, I must admit, being the father of Makonnen Christian, who was named after Ras Makonnen of Adwa, and Samora Christian, let the record reflect, Judge Andre knows, the evidence is in. I do have my dashiki, and I'm proud to say I didn't have to put it and hide it in a brown paper bag, as I used to have to do in the days of African Liberation Day in the 1970s, when I used to go behind the Goodwill School and take out my little T-shirt and put my dashiki and a woman caught me in the corner of Bath Road and King George and said, Christian, you're a Black Power too. I'm going to tell your father where I see you. And I made to hide in the crowd. I had to hide in the crowd behind maybe Neville Graham or Reggie Armour, all of those guys, as you know, Glenn Ducre. They were all members of the MND, Movement for New Dominica, the Black Power boys of the day. The woman's name was Tesme. If anybody in Roseau remembers, Tesme was a well-known ice cream vendor. She would sell ice cream to the police and firemen on a Sunday afternoon. And Tesme said, Christian boy, you in that? And so here we are. We have not sold our country out, and we must never sell our country out. And on the reparations issue, I will say this. The Europeans have a moral obligation to pay us reparations. But I'd be fooling a young man or an old man or middle-aged man, no matter the age is, if I were to have them waste their time waiting for manna to fall from heaven. Cock would grow teeth before that happens. I think the time would be better spent educating ourselves. When you're a policeman, don't brutalize your people. When you're a civil servant, don't steal the public's money. And when you're Minister of Oil in Nigeria, don't take $1.9 and $2.9 billion and then have a diplomatic passport from our beloved island Dominica, as if you're an ambassador of Dominica. When the real ambassadors are here, one Nuveen Andre, one Excellency Crispin Gregoire, and the other one who has a radio station by the name of Sheridan. These are the real ambassadors. So Pan-Africanism in the 21st century must mean that each of us are educated, we are dedicated, and we are honest in pursuing the rights of our Carib and Kalinago people and unification with Africa by whatever means necessary. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gabe, for your fine opening remarks here. Ambassador Crispin Gregoire, you, as Gabe said, you worked in Africa. You're married to two African women. You really have put yourself in the middle of African life. And then you maintained this connection with Africa. I know for a fact that you've done a tremendous amount of work with Algeria. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of your experiences there before we move on.
Yes. Good evening, Sheridan. Thank you for inviting me again tonight. Let me hasten to add my greetings to Lambi and Sherwin for doing a stellar job at the controls, and my esteemed colleague panelists. Well, Justice Andre is your co-moderator, Sheridan. So that leaves Gabriel as the other guest and myself. No, I'm extremely honored to be part of this tonight. I think that's a very important program, one which I think a lot will come out. So I think the listening public needs to really focus, because we're going to say some things tonight that you probably never heard before. And especially like underscoring the history of our link, our consciousness with the African continent, how it has emerged, how it has grown, and where we are today. For me, it was one of the most gratifying moments to be alive, to finally see that the states of Africa and the Caribbean community are meeting and working towards a structural framework for how they will cooperate in the future. So this second summit, and the first one was an important foundation, but because it happened virtually, we really give a lot more credence to this second one that just happened in Addis Ababa in early September, because the leaders from the Caribbean made the trip, or the majority of them made the trip to Addis Ababa to meet with the African leadership. I think that it's an important milestone in our post-colonial journey, and I'm speaking of both regions of the African continent as a continent with 54 countries, and the Caribbean community, which is 14 countries right now, but in the future we will have the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and Puerto Rico as part of the CARICOM. That's what I see futuristically, so that all the countries, all the member states independent countries of the Caribbean will finally be under one roof, on one grouping. That will not happen in my lifetime, but we're not that far on that trajectory. I wanted to say that of all the speeches that were made, and there were many speeches made at the conference, at the summit. The president of Angola spoke for the African continent, and the president of the prime minister of St. Kitts and Nevis spoke for the CARICOM as the incoming chair. But it was, I want to say something about one person who spoke very eloquently on that day, and he said something very significant. And his name, somebody that I worked with at the UN when he was the chief of the cabinet of the president of the General Assembly at the time, Jean Ping from Gabon, and Mr. Pafe Onanga Anyanga, special representative of the Secretary General to the African Union and the head of the United Nations Office to the African Union. And he emphasized in his statement a very important point that I want you as the listeners to focus on and make that connection. He said that the world must recognize that Africa and the Caribbean are victims of two compounded injustices: the impact of colonialism on the one hand, and the transatlantic slave trade, and the fact that we were under colonial domination when today's multilateral system was created. So here, after World War II, we were all colonies. And it's only after World War II and the decision was made to give independence to all the countries who were colonies. The African countries, some of them got their independence, others had to fight for it. We in the Caribbean, in the English Caribbean, that is, and if you add, Haiti had to fight for their independence, which they got a long time before everybody else. But those of us that came later, like Jamaica, like Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, the first countries that to get their independence, we were all colonies just like the African countries. And that is one of the things that really hurts me when I think about a country we will speak about called Western Sahara, because they are the only country left in Africa that hasn't gotten their full independence. But they are a full member of the African Union. And when I'll speak a little bit about that because it involves Dominica in many ways, more than one way. So if I were just to focus on some of the highlights of the conference, right? And to put it in simplistic terms, I want to say for those people who are really into scholarly work, you should go and read the communique that came out of that summit, because it's quite detailed and very specific. But that communique, if I can just underscore some things from it. First of all, it was a grouping, it was a meeting that brought together African nations, Caribbean nations, and the global African diaspora to strengthen unity, to deepen integration, and jointly pursue reparations and reparatory justice through a comprehensive transcontinental partnership framework. And all of that is to be done under the theme of transcontinental partnership in pursuit of reparatory justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. Now, that is significant because now the whole African Union, which is 54 countries, are joining with the 14 CARICOM states, and hopefully Cuba and the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico will also be part of this. They're advocating for us now for the colonial powers to pay us reparations. Now, Gabriel made a point that it will be long in coming, but I say by 2050, maybe we might reach there. I hope the European countries, they have another 25 years to come to the table and admit that they're ready to pay. They're not going to get away without paying. But having said that, the Africa CARICOM Summit is the gathering of African and and Caribbean leaders aimed at strengthening the historic ties between the two regions, and turning past injustices, including slavery and colonization, into opportunities for solidarity, cooperation, and reparative justice. And the summit, it focused on political, economic, social, and cultural collaboration, advancing trade, investment, innovation, youth engagement, and shared development. Now, youth engagement is very, very critical because Africa has the largest population of young people in the world. And our youth in the Caribbean, we have to link up with our youth in Africa. The summit also seeks to coordinate efforts that we're going to launch going forward on reparations, on promoting global advocacy. And by that, I mean, Africa is not represented in the power structure of the world. Deliberately, they've kept us out because we were colonies at the time when World War II ended and they divided the world. For example, there's no African country on the Security Council as a permanent member. And this is one of the things we're going to be fighting for. We've been fighting for it. The whole time I was at the UN from 2002, we were advocating for one permanent member seat for the African continent. And the summit, is pushing for how we can collaborate in many arenas, whether it's in trade, whether it's on the question of youth, on the question of health. We're talking now about a health partnership, which would be called the Health Development Partnership for Africa and the Caribbean, HEDPAC, and advancing the expansion of the Afrexim Bank, which is the headquarters is being built in Barbados for the Caribbean. So I see a lot of tangible things that will emerge. And don't forget the cultural dynamic. We also have the Rasta community in Ethiopia that came from the Caribbean, and people like you've mentioned before, like Raska being the also known as Desmond Trotter, who is actually there. And the leaders did make a visit to Shashamani, that community where the Rasta community from the Caribbean is based. The Emperor Haile Selassie Gabriel had deeded some land to the Rastas from the Caribbean, and people who wanted to return to Africa. So, but all of that did not just happen on its own. And Dr. Justice Irving Andre started talking about the different people who played major roles on the African continent, and I won't repeat them. In fact, he's highlighted very well the Dominicans that were involved. I should say that probably the first thing that I'd like to mention, which is probably not well known, that maybe one of our earliest relationships with the African continent happened on the Premier Edward Oliver LeBlanc. His government made a financial contribution to the liberation struggle led by the African National Congress of South Africa. That was in the early 70s. I think around
1970, yeah, apparently.
1970 or 70, yeah, right. And I don't remember the exact amount, but irrespective of what the amount was, that symbolism to really contribute to a liberation struggle by Edward Oliver LeBlanc was one of the most far-reaching things that he did in foreign policy. And he was not even responsible for foreign policy. The British.
But Irving, do you remember the exact amount that Edward LeBlanc contributed?
Oh, I think it was $1,000 because Eugenia Charles made fun of it by counter-proposing a sum of on or about $2,000. But in 1970, I'm pretty sure, not 100. I know I mentioned it in my book on Edward LeBlanc, but $1,000 is what comes to mind that he offered in 1970 or thereabouts.
Right.
I think a further sum of $10,000 was offered later, Irving. to the Organization of African Unity Liberation Committee. $10,000.
Okay. And you know, the African National Congress sent one of its ambassadors to Dominica to thank the Dominican people. Of course, that was in the heyday when we did not have that kind of media access that we have today, but that was not well known, right? And Dr. Andre has mentioned a lot of names of Dominican people who've been contributing to the African continent, and both in terms of thought and so on. I myself, Mr. G, I don't like to blow my trumpet, but I need to say how I'm connected to all of this.
Well, go ahead and do that anyway.
Yeah, well, I was one of the early recruits of the Black Power movement in Dominica. Maybe what I call the first tier of recruits, because, you know, the leaders of the movement, they were mostly brothers who were studying at universities, whether in Jamaica, Trinidad, whether in the US, and they were the intellectuals who kind of brought the awareness, and they found a willing niche, and that was St. Mary's Academy. And so that the Black Power movement that emerged around 67, 68, I think around 68, was really linked to a protest about Rosie Douglas's incarceration. And that protest movement sort of eventually morphed into the movement for New Dominica. And I don't remember when it went from Black Power movement to movement for New Dominica. All I do know is that when I became part of the movement for New Dominica about 1973, it was already called Movement for New Dominica. So somewhere along the line, we changed from Black Power movement to Movement for New Dominica. And I think it was Gabriel or maybe Irvin who mentioned that we had the headquarters at Canal Lane in Goodwill. And the rest is history, because the Black Power movement left an indelible mark on Dominica's political evolution going forward. So it has its imprint, and Dominican politics has been shaped in some way by this group of people who came out of the Black Power movement, the Movement for New Dominica. Now, one of the things about the Black Power movement was that that strong affinity for Africa was always there, even before the Rasta movement emerged. The Rasta movement emerged later on. And of course, the Rasta movement was avowedly a major advocate for Africa and back to Africa. There was this whole notion of going back to Africa, participating in things cultural in Africa, like the Festival of African Arts. In 1977, the Nigerians were hosting the Festac.
Crispin, give me 1 second. Lambi, you want to take a call?
Yeah. Caller, please go ahead.
I say praises, thanks, blessings, and glory to all those who sacrifice their personal safety and security trying to elevate mankind to humanity. Can I just say Rastafari people, excluding Shoei and Lambi?
Yeah, you can. Yes, go ahead.
I always know Dave, who is a big Rasta man, but Dr. Andre, Sheridan Gregoire, Crispin Gregoire, I never know the man was big Black Power man fighting, you know, the resistance. I give thanks because you all have paved the way for me to come and meet it a bit easier. Because I'm a little boy, I heard about, you know, what they were doing to the Black Power movement. You could not walk with the dirty jeans. You could not walk with plaits on your head, and the brutality. I live to see all the murder of the dread people under the bush and all of that. But gentlemen, let me just commend all you highly and give thanks for all your participation. Dr. Andre, you there? Dr. Andre, you there?
I'm listening to you. Yes, blessings.
I think cat cut your tongue. So I want to give thanks because I can see the uphill climb, because the level of treachery that is still within the region and even on the continent on a global scale as well. And I know it takes some unusual form of courage and commitment to still stand up and talk the way you all are talking and remind this generation what you all have done in the interest of Africa, Dominica, the resistance. But I just want to say something quickly. I'd rather listen. There is a woman called Mia Motley, Mia Amma Motley. That woman is a snake on the grass. Don't worry with all the African king and dressing up and talking conscious. One day you all might conclude what I have concluded. She has a different agenda. She pretends to be down to earth, but her head is up in the cloud, and there is something to say, show me your company, I will tell you who you are. You're not seeing that treacherous man there, and who is his closest ally? And let me give glory to Rosie Douglas. Bless your soul. Some people say, may your soul rest in peace. I am saying, may your soul continue to torment the traitors and the thieves within the resistance. Blessings to you all, gentlemen, and thanks.
And thanks a lot for that contribution. Dr. Andre, I suspect you may want to make a response to that, but Lambi, let's take another call.
Thanks for calling, caller. Please go ahead.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. Lambi, how are you guys doing?
We're fine.
Yes, and sorry there's a little background noise. I'm trying to get some exercise here, but I couldn't help but falling in when I heard the conversations in the gentleman. And Mr. Christian, you highlighted something about the consciousness and the time versus the consciousness that is, or the lack of consciousness there is in our youth and in the generation that appears to be in this modern time. And I couldn't help but ponder on where we have been and where we are today as a young black man who was born in 79, I call it the year of the revolution, and hearing about Rosie Douglas, some of the probably misinformation, hearing about the Black Power movement, hearing about all these great Dominicans who have accomplished things in the 1930s, 1930s, and so on. And today it seems like we as Dominican people cannot do anything for ourselves. And what that reminds me of is the importance of knowing who you are, knowing your history. And I've always said that no man knows where they're going to go if they do not know who they come from, where they come from, and the history. And for you to truly foster a path forward in your own personal development as an individual or as a people, you have to first understand where you came from, who you came from, so that you can chart a path forward. And I think in this whole story, the word resilience comes out because despite of colonization, despite slavery, despite the racism, despite apartheid and all these things, the black people have continued to not just exist but thrive, to the point where at this point every country is looking at the resources, not just the physical resources, but the human resources that Africa today possesses. And I want to thank you guys for your contribution to empowering people like me to have true value and meaning in myself. Because when I see for example, the Chinese in Dominica, and they base their value on their history of doing things like the Great Wall, doing things like the terracotta warriors, doing all these things that they ride on today. It tells me that we as a black people have to really evaluate our worth, our values, where we come from, who we are, the strength we possess, the resilience we possess, for us to make any meaningful contribution in our advancement. And the last thing I would like to add, in addition to asking for reparation from European nations, what I would also like to see is the connection of the Caribbean people to their real family, their brothers and sisters, their bloodline in the African continent. Because I've heard a lot of times that we come from Ashanti and all these tribes, but many of us cannot trace our history past what Europeans have told us. And in addition to reparations, I think part of European responsibility is to trace every Caribbean citizen's root and blood back to the motherland. And I will rest there, but I want to say again, thank you, gentlemen, for sharing that history, sharing that story, because people like me take these things serious and it's enlightening tonight. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Andre. Again, but let's take another call from Lambi before we move on.
Thanks, caller, for being there. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Sheridan.
Hi.
Remember Walter Rodney from Guyana?
Yes.
As a lecturer at New University, Jamaica.
Right.
He was deported, and it's because he was preaching black consciousness. So that's where Para was going to university at the time. When it came back here, preaching black power. Julian Dunson and the two River brothers. You see? So that is how black power started in Dominica. Because Walter was deported from Jamaica, sent back to Guyana, where actually Burnham actually sent a soldier of him and gave him a device with a bomb in it. Because of that. Now the Rastafari movement now in Dominica, a man called Sidney De Silva from Jamaica came here on a conference of the president representing the scavengers in Jamaica. And he was the first man that came in Dominica as a Rasta man with dreadlocks on his head. And he tells us from the time you live here, Rasta going to emerge here because he was always in the corner tables giving us a lecture about Rasta and Rastafari and Selassie. Understand that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, no, when Sarah and came down from Jamaica, they got them two students with dreadlocks on their head. We had gathering in gardens and in the grammar school. It was led by Casca and Vincent Elwin, Pottersville. And when they took out their hat on their head, we were frightened because we could never believe they had locks on their head. You see? So they were the two Jamaican at which with locks on their head. And it said from the time we left here, there will emerge Rasta in Dominica. So that is the beginning of Rasta started.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot for that. Oh, Crispin, could you mute your mic? I want you to ask Dr. Andre to respond to some of what the last three callers said, but just to remind the last caller, I in fact was the president of the Guild of, allow me just 1 second as a caller to hold on, just as president of the Guild of Undergraduates at the University of the West Indies, in fact, at the time that Walter Rodney was deported. Lamy, let's take the call.
Yes, caller, please go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, you're on. Go ahead, please.
Yes, gentlemen. I have a question. Why are there foreign forces on the island of Dominica when there's no state of emergency, there's no riot, nothing going? Why are there foreign forces? And please, Dominicans, don't trust the Bajans. Not too long ago, when the Eastern Caribbean currency, they were refusing to even accept Eastern Caribbean currency in Barbados. Then I was in Barbados a number of years ago, walking to a hotel restaurant where they had a buffet. All the white people walking in, they were welcome. When the kid came up to me, the guy asked me if I know how much is the buffet. Bajans are racist, okay? They consider themselves to be little England. Meanwhile, we have the idiots walking on our streets. It came to Dominica not too long ago, the same RSS people. You take up from the people of Dominica. And now you guys are welcoming them in Dominica, walking the street, no state of emergency, no riot. What kind of we have a judge on the panel right now. What kind of crap is that going on in Dominica? How can you have foreign forces in your island and there's no state of emergency? Meanwhile, the guy is in Hong Kong, wherever he is right now, he should stay there and take his wife there and migrate to China. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that contribution. Dr. Andre, your turn.
Yes, very good points raised by all the callers, to be quite frank with you. I mean, in terms of even Dominica's involvement in a very positive fashion in issues relating to the African the African continent. I think the history is even more, quite frankly, is even more profound. I mean, you had, for example, I mean, just giving you an anecdote. Why is it that when Nelson Mandela was sworn in as the leader of South Africa, why was Rosie Douglas, someone called Rosie Douglas, invited to sit at the head table? You think it because they had no one else? No, it was a testament of his contribution to the struggle for equality and liberty in Africa that he was. In the 1960s, many of our leaders, and juxtapose what happened in the 60s to what is happening or not happening now. You had persons like J.R. Casimir writing poems about Africa, Africa Arise, about giving a history in poetic form of the various African deities, those who contributed significantly to civilization, which we know precious little about. You had Edward Leblanc also writing, and in 1974 or thereabouts, he penned this poem called Nom Noe. That's the premier of your country, you know, taking time off to write a poem called Nom Noe to a black man, listen, and basically writing a work which speaks to his people, as opposed to chasing money in every far-flung corner of the continent. So we have a long history, not just those names I've mentioned initially, but others as well. I mean, certainly we haven't even talked about Gabriel. Gabriel is modest. Gabriel was honored and given a medal by the Ethiopian royal family for his contributions in Maryland, and to the upliftment of again the African diaspora in America. But let us look at this. Here in Dominica, as we speak, we are seeking to boost our tourism imprint, but we are seeking to do it in a fashion that is a mere echo of the historical approach to tourism in the islands. You build hotels, you offer packages. Hopefully persons from Canada, United States, England will come and spend a week, drink a glass or two of grapefruits. I'm not even sure they can walk the trails right now, because my understanding is that the condition is not anything to boast about. You have, however, in Africa and elsewhere, you have a different type of tourism being marketed based on history, based on culture. You even have it in Martinique and Guadeloupe and other parts of the former colonized world. In other words, trying to attract a tourism product, which is more, quite frankly, more redemptive in terms of its focus, which is somewhat educational, which is based on historical linkages. People in the diaspora, people in Africa, or even for the French, and hence the reason why even the World Creole Festival, quite frankly, needs a reworking. It should engender the cementing of these ties. We haven't talked about our music in the 60s and 70s. Pray for the Black Man. I know Gabriel sings very well. Who made that song in the late 60s? What about the songs by our callous bands? Exile, no to avoid pour rien. I think it means there's no more Johnny Cakes in the market. Midnight Groovers, Bells Combo, Jeff Joe, among many others. Why is it that their lyrics, a significant portion of their lyrics, or the lyrics of many of their songs, were African oriented and focused? It is because they spoke to a lived reality, which quite frankly, today in 2025, we seem to be ignoring at our peril. So whereas these former colonized countries have moved towards embracing a certain collective identity based on a historical consciousness, we are still doing the same old thing. Looking for people in skimpy bathing suits, drinking a little bush rum. Didn't our leader offer somebody as a symbol of our tourism a bottle of rum called BB, which means bottom brain, as somebody told me? Is that the focus? Is that our focus today in 2025, as opposed to something which is spiritually uplifting and educational, but something which can engender at the same time not only money for the consolidated fund, but also a kind of spiritual upliftment? And yes, I concur with Gabriel that certainly we are owed reparations. And if you read certain books that I was exposed to years ago, The World the Slaveholders Made by a historian called Eugene Genovese, an American Marxist, who ironically was at Sir George Williams in '69, and who was quite scathing in his criticism of what happened in January, February '69, because he adopted an old doctrine and Marxist position with respect to that. Read it, for example, C.L.R. James' book on the Haitian Revolution, Eric Williams' Capitalism and Slavery, and many others, which gives you a sense as to the wealth created by these small, minuscule islands for their mother countries, for God's sakes. And it is not by any coincidence that these islands were known as the jewels in the English crown. So that is one of the reasons why reparation is necessary, is a must. And we're not even talking about the contributions West Indians have made post-slavery, after World War I, the Windrush generation, the brilliant minds that have gone to England and made significant contributions to developing the economy and the intellectual life of that so-called mother country. The brilliant minds that have made significant contributions to the United States and to France, to be quite frank with you, not just in music, but in all the fields of endeavor. We have to harness that creative energy, that intellectual energy. And as Gabriel said, with a focus on science and computers and all this thing, digitization and related fields, we have to try to harness that energy and make it work for us in a fashion based on the Singapore model, as he was saying to Sean Douglas this afternoon. But the question is, are we ready to focus on those positive created energies, or are we just simply living in a fashion that mimics the colonial attitude of raping the country irrespective of the cost? That is where we are. Which road are we taking, my friends? Nom noir, according to Edward Oliver Leblanc. Which road are you treading? And that is the question. They can have 100 summits, but that is not the point. You judge your leaders not by the summits, but what they do on the ground. what they do to the island's resources, what they do or don't do for their own people, what do they do for themselves, to what extent do they line their pockets, to what extent do they persecute their own people. These are the, to what extent do they, to what extent do they treat properly their own creative artists? Do they ban them from the national festivals because they sing songs which may be critical to the political directorate? Or do they embrace them and learn from them and make the country or the people benefit from the creative energies of their own people? To what extent do they allow Dominicans to harvest the bounty of their intellectual richness? And then some of these same leaders are talking about reparations? Huh? Are you kidding me? Some of these leaders go to the UN and they treat the smaller, impoverished islands in the Caribbean, quite frankly, like they're part of their own plantation. They buttress and enable dictatorship in the islands, but preach a gospel of democracy and freedom and anti-colonialism in the United Nations. Are these the leaders you're going to entrust with reparations? Huh? Do you look at the record in these respective islands before you dole out monies to them, and you ask yourself, to what extent will the people in these islands benefit from these reparations? Huh? So these are questions that we have to ask. And we cannot base our arguments just on the basis of, okay, these white colonizers, they owe us black people, and we should give to their leaders tens of millions of dollars to ease our conscience. But what happens to the people on the ground, those who can't afford to buy paracetamol, those who can't afford to buy Fensic, those who have to bring diapers to the hospital, those who can't cover their houses, those who are deprived jobs, those who cannot subsist on their little meager pensions, while their leaders live a life of lavish, obscene luxury. Folks, the reparations questions are very multifaceted, and we have to look at it from that perspective. Empowering our people, and we can't allow our people to depend on our leaders to do that for them, because on the contrary, it is a theme that recurs over and over again. It is the replacement of one form of exploitation, colonialism, with one which is more insidious because it is being done by our very own. Therein lies the problem.
So, Gabe, let me come to you, but let's take a call from Landy before we come to you, Gabe. You lost the call, Landy? Okay, probably the caller will call back, and then you'll just make us a signal when the call comes in, and we'll take the call. But Gabe, have we built on all of these positive, creative energies of our past Black Power leaders on the continent? Let's go to a call, Landy.
Thanks, caller, for your patience. Go ahead, please.
Dr. Andrew has said it on the news, because unless the leaders of the Caribbean cannot get together as one body on that subject of repatriation, preparation, and compensation for black people as slaves, because the slave masters get compensated, and up to now we're still fighting for that. The leaders of the Caribbean have come together as one body and confront the United Nations that is compulsory. We must get our repatriation, our compensation, and what we need. Unless they come together as one body, I don't know, but we have to get it by compulsory.
Yep, thanks a lot for that, caller. All right, Gabe, hold on one sec. Let's take another call, Landy.
Yes, caller, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. The black leaders in the Caribbean today are worse than what the white men were to our people. Worse. They treat our people like nothing, like trash, especially that one in Dominica, who cares nothing, goes to China, signs a deal, comes back to Dominica, and tells the people it's not their damn business what he signed. You ever hear more crap than that? When the President of the United States goes out, when he comes back, everybody in the U.S. knows what he signed, what he did not sign. But that idiot thinks he owns the people. And it's a shame, because right now, I think the people of Dominica are in a political coma. Really. They just can't think. Cannot think. They're in a coma. Have a good night.
Have a good night yourself. Gabe, over to you. You're muted.
Thank you very much, Brother Sheridan. I just want to endorse everything that my brothers Irving and Crispin have said. And I also want to endorse the caller who says that we need to get out of the coma. That is, we need to free our minds. And the way we do that is by educating ourselves. I want to just take a moment to say that all Dominicans now, pretty much, or most of them, have access to the internet. They have smartphones. I'd like them to go on to the New York Public Library and is archives and manuscripts of the New York Public Library, J.R. Kazemi Papers, 1919, 1981. I'm looking at the site now, and it says here, J.R. Kazemi was a poet, editor, and founding member. This is the New York Public Library now, the largest public library system in the United States. That J.R. Kazemi was a poet, editor, and founding member and secretary of the Rosa Dominica Division of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA. The papers in our collection consist of correspondence from 1919 to 1981. They include legal documents and printed matter relating to Kazemi's writings, and they deal with social and political issues affecting the island of Dominica and the Black diaspora. It goes on to talk about the people with whom they have correspondence, copies of correspondence involving our great leader, who was a Black Power leader and Pan-Africanist before we were born, and so we were not the first. It includes significant correspondence with Marcus Garvey, founder of the UNIA, Kaisley Hayford of the Gold Coast, Ghana, and editor of Ethiopian Bound, Malaku Bayen of the Ethiopian World Federation. Malaku Bayen, for those of you who do not know, was the first cousin of Emperor Haile Selassie, who was sent to study at Howard University and founded the first African diaspora nonprofit corporation in U.S. history, which was called the Ethiopian World Federation, of which one of the leading members in Ethiopia today is no less a person than the St. Mary's Academy graduate of 1971, one Desmond Trotter, aka Ras Kabinda. It goes on to say that he corresponded with Sylvia Pankhurst. Sylvia Pankhurst, for the listening audience, was one of the leading suffragettes. Those were the women, the white women in England and the United States, who were agitating for the suffrage, the voting rights of women. That's why they're called suffragettes. So here is Gerald Kazemi corresponding with Sylvia Pankhurst, editor of the New Times and the Ethiopian News. He also corresponded with W.B. Du Bois, or Dubois, the famous African-American who founded, one of the founders of the NAACP, corresponding with Roy Wilkins, with Langston Hughes, with Cyril Briggs, on and on and on. It's just too long to really recite on the program this evening. But I am saying that where Irving and I and Crispin and yourself, Lambi, and Brother Sherwin and Sheridan have made any progress is because we have engaged in not bloviation, not idle speculation, but studied effort and the scientific method. So folks, the way we're going to get out of our condition of the coma that the brother spoke about when he called a moment ago is by engaging ourselves in reading, in studying, in understanding our history, and writing and educating others. Because the biggest problem we have today in Dominica is the education our students have been fed have made them anti-patriotic and anti-national. Because the people who are patriotic, who are Pan-Africanists, who understand the Kalinago heritage, they understand the African heritage, they understand themselves, they have self-respect, they are dedicated, they will not accept malfeasance in governance, They will not accept for anything and anything to be done. They will hold themselves to a high standard. But if you have no standard, it is because you have no self-knowledge. And when you have no self-knowledge, the society perishes. And that's what we see. So I'm asking all of you, stop using the cell phone and your computer and your tablet to pass jokes and to tell Tara, and who pum there, that kind of nonsense. Let's be educated in our use of technology. Focus, therefore, on understanding who we are and writing the necessary history. Because look, the collection of J. Ralph Kazemi is not in Dominica. Where's our library, Sheridan Gregoire? Where's our library, Lambert? Where's our library, Sherwin? Where's our library, Irving? Crispin, where's our library? The collection is at the Schomburg Institute in New York City. And when a progressive, conscious, not in a coma government gets into office, we will have to buy a copy of our own history from the New York Public Library. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks a lot, Gabe. And Gabe, I wonder whether you would just tell us a little bit more about the comment that you made earlier about the opportunities that exist for engineering in the knowledge industries and so on in terms of collaboration with the African continent.
Indeed. So let me just share with you that there are a few Dominicans, including the son of Dr. Richard Green and Leslie Ann Green, who is now an instructor at Emory-Riddle, and I think he now flies for Northwestern. And I believe Emory-Riddle to be the Harvard of aviation schools. You're talking about in excess of $100,000 US. Ethiopian Airlines can give you a superior experience for half of that because of the differential in the currency, US versus the birr. Okay? The advantage they have from any school of aviation in the United States is that they have the largest fleet. In fact, Ethiopian Airlines fleet, listen to this bombshell, folks. The Ethiopian Airlines fleet as of October 7th, 2025, that's tonight, is more modern than any American fleet. And at Ethiopian Airlines now is a manufacturer for Boeing. They make rudders, they make harnesses, and they make other equipment for Boeing. They have 19 factories in Ethiopia now making components for aircraft, and they're assembling their own small aircraft. That is where Ethiopia is. So if you go to Emory-Riddle, for instance, as a Dominican, you would have to then get an internship at an airline after you graduate. Ethiopian Airlines has its own university. So you can be at the university and you go do your internship in the airline that the university is part of. You understand? And they're open now to accepting students, and there's students coming from the Caribbean, and any Dominican who's interested, we will be happy to use our good offices through AFDA Aero Services and our partnership with Ethiopian Airlines, which I visited again this summer to get our people in there, and they will meet a heroic Dominican. I call him heroic because the things he's done. He's been a director of civil aviation instruction in Kenya. He has flown all over the Congo, and he's now one of the senior captains at Ethiopian Airlines, the one and only Ronald Hodge of the St. Mary's Academy from Harlem, the Harlem Bomber. He used to fly for Liat. He's well known and he's highly respected. And he just sent me the awards for last year. He was in the top 25 employees of Ethiopian Airlines out of a Ethiopian Airlines complement of 18,000 people. The Ethiopian Airlines campus is about 6 square miles. And so you're talking about a major corporate entity. And a Dominican is there flying all kinds of planes. Makes you feel mighty proud for the quality of our people. And I encourage all Dominicans to read about Captain Hodge, to read about J. Ralph Kazemi, to read about your history, and stop letting your mind reside in a comatose state, which we have no use in advancing the cause of Pan-Africanism and the unification of our people at home and abroad. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gabe. And then Captain Hodge was, in fact, I believe, on this program on the Global View on Q with us some time ago. And we were very delighted to hear what he had to say about his escapades over there. But Crispin, let's talk a little bit. Okay, before we go to Crispin, let's take a call, Lambi.
There's one
Crispin, mute you.
born in Dominica of French parentage, and we come upon Africanist. And he was born in Dominica on the 28th of December, 1858. And he forgot no one is talking about him. How come?
What's his name?
His name, I tell you his name is Julius Celestine Edward. You haven't heard about that name?
Yeah, I know about him. He was a publisher in England.
Oh yes, but he was a Pan-Africanist.
Yes.
England. Because I have the book there with me by Peter Price, The History of Black People in Britain, Staying Power. So I'm reading from that book now, and his name is unmentioned in the history of Dominican. How come?
Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for that. Lambi, you have another call, Lambi?
Yes, we have a few calls. Good evening, caller. Go ahead, please.
You were so right in what you said. I went to that mixed school, Sutton Mixed School. I went to the Chateau. I did not go to the grammar school or the academy. But you know where I went to? That public library. And I would go there every day after school. And I learned a lot. Most of my knowledge came from that public library.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that.
Brother Greg, we started in the mixed school together. We started in mixed school together.
All right.
And that's when I get my knowledge. But these people in Dominica right now who call themselves a so-called government keeps the people in bondage. They keep them ignorant, okay? They free things. You go to a hospital and you cannot even get medicine in the hospital. You cannot get this, you cannot get that. And they're saying they love the people. That man does not love the people. He loves himself. And in a real country, this guy would have been arrested already. Thank you.
And thanks a lot for that contribution. Any other calls, Lambi? All right, so let's go over to Crispin. If a call comes in, you'll just make us a signal, Lambi, and we'll take it. Crispin, I mean, what about the opportunities that let's take a call from Lambi.
Yes, go ahead, please, caller.
Yeah, just quickly, gentlemen. I heard Gebu, blessings again. Sheridan and everybody, blessings to you all again.
Blessings.
I always looking back and say, I wish I'd gone to school. One brother told me, do not regret. Maybe you would not have found yourself if you did. And to me, it's still a little troublesome for me to, agree with it. They say he who knows better must do better, supposed to do better. Gentlemen, I heard Gebu said something there, and that's what really catch my attention. As I said, I wish I had much more education in my head. Well, I have none. But when I listen to the level of criminality that among Caribbean leaders, just around us. And then these are people that have gone to school, they have read extensively. Maybe it's what they read, so Gebu, or what they may have read. So Gebu may have a point. But these people know better, and they're not doing better. They go to the United Nations, dress up like some African queen and king, and they talk all the good talk about reparation and, everything they know about. And these people are holding the people hostage. A lot of them do not want to vacate the halls of power of government, and they are dictators doing all manner of evil. And as Dr. Andres I said, and they're asking for reparation, but they're stealing billions from the people. How could people who knows better not to do better? So I do not subscribe to that, because there are too much criminals in the world who knows better. They are quite educated. They have read extensively, and they're more criminal than a man who did not go to school at all. I just wanted to insert that, and I want to give thanks to those who have gone through the transition and those who are still there fighting a genuine, honest, and sincere fight. Because to me, it seems to be, a never-ending fight. Like there is no end in sight, So it is so sad to see the people that's supposed to stand in solidarity with people like you all. They're stealing this country's money. Dominica is the exception. Enslaving people, tear gassing, bullets and things, and they want to come in and smile like. Yeah, so I don't want to get nasty on all the program there tonight. Gentlemen, blessings to you all.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And now, Irving, before I go back to Crispin, Irving, I wanted you to respond to this caller. He had made a comment earlier. Well, and again, based on these comments he just made, but he made a comment earlier about the role of Mayor Motley in the region.
Yeah, I have to confess that I am very disturbed, and I'm putting it as nicely as I can, by the role of the Barbadian Prime Minister as it relates to Dominica. I am very concerned because it seems to me that as head of the Caribbean security infrastructure or architecture, as the person who has been charged with the responsibility of assigning the RSS to certain trouble spots in the Caribbean, that role, in my respectful view, has been prostituted, and it has been used in a cynical fashion designed to keep or to perpetuate autocratic rule in Dominica. You cannot have a regional security force unleashed on one of the poorest islands in the Caribbean on the very eve, as in less than 24 hours before a general election. And it was unleashed on a city or village or town which was and is known to be opposed to the political directorate. What message do you think that sends? Could they have done that in Jamaica, or Barbados, or Trinidad, or Guyana, or St. Kitts, or Antigua, or St. Vincent? And they're here again assisting our police in the recovery of guns. And I heard they've recovered 6 guns and an unknown or an unannounced quantity of money. How much money? And if you've recovered, who did you charge? Huh? Where was that money? Was it on the mango tree? Who did you charge? The only thing they charge, I'm told, is somebody's battery. Nothing else. So what is the justification? It has precious little to do with the recovery of firearms. It's intimidation. It's setting a stage to build up fear in the country. But as we've said, as number of your callers, Mr. G, have said, Dominica is a small country. Everybody knows where the guns are. And if you don't take it from me, look for someone with divine knowledge. Go ask Father Sharpless. Huh? We know when there are certain funerals and people are firing guns in the air as a final salute, it is known who's doing those things. It is not a secret. And when a barrel of gun comes through the customs and the barrel is seized, but no one is apprehended, we know it's a joke. So you don't need the RRS. You just need honest, committed law enforcement agents to enforce the laws of Dominica. That's all we need. To enforce the electoral laws, to enforce the laws with respect to possession of a weapon, to educate the police that if a gun is marked as an exhibit in a trial, you don't have the authority to take it and to give it to the accused when his license had expired at the time he was charged. That makes a whole mockery of law and order in Dominica. So that's what we need. Honest to goodness law enforcement in Dominica. nothing else. If the police are left to do their jobs professionally, then you don't need anybody. All you need to do is probably overturn a couple broomsticks in various parts of Dominica, and you don't have any more problems, to be quite frank with you. So the caller is absolutely correct. You know, we have to take this thing seriously. And if this is where we are, and then we're talking about reparations, so if we cannot account for $30 million given by the World Health Organization to ameliorate the effects of COVID in Dominica, or was it Hurricane Maria? Nobody sees, nobody knows what happened to the money. Say reparations with Legasa. What are you going to do with it? Huh? You're going to build more houses without conferring title in terms of those who get those houses? You're going to build more houses and give it to only those who support the political directorate? Is that the significance of reparations to you as a people, as a leader? No, we're not ready for these things because we are our worst enemies. Our leaders, all too often, are our worst enemies. Not the white colonial master we like to prate about. Like we pompously go to the UN and talk about anti-colonial this and anti-colonial that, and engender feelings of remorse by the Western countries. So they will again come with a bag full of money and give it to you. And what do you do with it? What do you do with it? The answer is not blown in the wind. Dominicans on the ground know exactly what happens to that money because they know exactly what happens to the bulk of the majority of the money engendered from the sale of passports. Gabriel made reference earlier today. Go look at the court documents filed in the Zampoli lawsuit in New York. Listen to the Al Jazeera program in terms of who gets 90% and who gets 10%. Listen to the Chinese fella years ago who talked about who's getting Rolex watches and who is going to church to visit ladies of the night. That's the type of lifestyle. And you juxtapose that with the life of Edward Oliver, some of our past leaders. You see exactly what we are lacking. We are our worst enemies. And unless we change that, we ain't going anywhere. Well, most of us will migrate. And most of us will not even bother to return. To return to what? Because if you get sick, you cannot even get medicine, for God's sakes, at the hospital. And yet we are told that we have one of the best medical facilities in the whole of the Caribbean. But as soon as some of our leaders get sick, do you think they go up to Goodwill, to the China Friendship, whatever hospital it is? No, they want nothing to do with it. They're looking for America, they're looking for France, they're looking for Guadeloupe, and they're looking for Martinique. If that's how you treat your people, that is to say, you condemn them to a situation where there's inadequate health services, there's inadequate financial remuneration, there are inadequate pensions, they are not even given opportunities in their own country. Then what right do you have to talk about reparations, to talk about free movement of people, as if somehow that will miraculously boost your economy, when you are doing more harm to your economy and to your people than any colonizer that we had before? You are repeating the sins of our history. You're not giving your people a little hope to prosper, to develop agro-industry, to grow up little businesses, to develop a renewed tourism product, to shift from the past, to adopt something which is more spiritually redemptive, something which pays homage to your history, your culture, and to those who toil in the wilderness for decades. If we're not adopting that type of progressive approach, then we're just spinning our wheels. Don't take it from me, Take it from the lived experiences of Dominicans on the ground. You see, Don't just go to Dominica during the Creole Wolfers Festival, your lovely brand clothes with your Nike and your Walmart nice fashion and so on, and say, oh boy, Dominica is looking good because there's no zebra on the side of the road. Look at it in more profound fashion. Look at the systemic problems that unfortunately are keeping the people in virtual thraldom. Show that at least you have a sense of perspective based on your experiences in North America, not just the superficialities that you're looking at. And in that way, you can at least make a contribution to your country because you can recognize the deficiencies and you can try to alleviate some of them, as opposed to coming down every electoral cycle and in putting a hammer on the experiences of Dominicans on the ground. And you wait for another free ticket, because there's nothing as wonderful as a free ticket to come and vote, to put the padlock on the cell that you lock Dominicans on the ground in. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Irving. Thanks a lot. Great stuff. Before I go to Crispin, let me go back to you, Gabe. On the same, your thoughts on the same topic that Irving was just commenting on. I mean, the position of having the RSS in there and the position of Mia Motley and so on in the region, and what is happening to the people of Dominica.
First of all, Irving, I fully endorse everything Brother Irving has said, and I want to add to it. We cannot be doing worse than the colonizer did. Let me repeat what I just said. The nature island we have today did not happen by accident, When our father left the British Army, he was demobilized in 1947. And that same year, one of the leading forestry experts in the United Kingdom by the name of Borer, B-O-R-E-R, came down, and by 1948, they started the Dominica Forestry Service, and our father was one of the first recruits, and then he went over to the police service. And they had bamboo all the way from Malaysia that was planted in the Layu Valley. There's a place called Fan Chu. Fan Chu meant it was so slippery and mossy, you'd fall and you would hurt your back. And the land was always sliding. When the Forestry Service went into decline after the departure of people like Christopher Maximin, who was Chief Forestry Officer, we had Mathieu Lake forming. The land slipped and formed a huge lake in the interior. Dominicans, are you listening? Do you understand that the quality of our rivers, the quality of our forests, all are interrelated and correlate to our quality of life? That the reason we're having floods every time the rain falls in Dominica, that never happened when I was a child. We never had flooding like that. It's because our tree cover since Maria and Erica before, there has been no massive reforestation campaign. So if you're talking Pan-Africanism and partnership with Africa, you cannot partner with nothing, you have to have something. And what we have is a gift from Almighty God called our natural environment, and we're doing a piss poor job with it. They built a hotel on a wetland in Portsmouth. They're building a quarry in the heritage wet area affecting Pegua River. Our rivers are drying up. We're having flash floods because we are not doing reforestation. What's going on? So Dominicans, this whole idea of always having a jump up and always stoned to the bone is not going to help us. We have to have a focus and a dedication to the island we love. Rebuild Dominica, of which we are part. We've donated before through the Academy equipment for the Botanic Gardens. We are helping farmers. We believe in planting breadfruit because it feeds us, but it also provides shade for lower level plants, and it also is a good retainer of soil and a retainer of water. When you do not have trees that can hold the soil and can retain water, you have flash flooding. And when you have flash flooding, you have the dissipation, destruction of our Quem Terre. Quem Terre is the Creole to mean the cream of the land. The Quemter is soil that was formed over hundreds of years of leaves falling to the ground and rotting and forming loam. That rich soil is the sort of bedrock of our existence, because if it's washed away, we will have a Haiti-like condition. Haiti in certain places, Sheridan, is like now desert because the tree cover has been lost. So we are saying as Pan-Africanists that we have to love the land. So we love our motherland, Africa, but those of us who are born in Dominica, we got to take care of Dominica first. It was Michael Douglas who said before he died, "Pa quite yo pour Dominique Hodno." Irvin says I can sing, but I think it goes like this. "Pa quite yo pour Dominique Hodno. Pa quite yo pour Dominique Hodno." Dominicans, don't let them take Dominica from us. We need to be responsible for the preservation of our environment, because if you're a Pan-Africanist, you have to be pro-environment. You have to love the rivers and love the trees and find ways in which we can build them up and not tear them down and not allow foreign concerns that are just interested in a quick profit to rip us off, to rip off the country we love, and then we will lose it, and then we'll say, "Papa Body, Kibagai fella," which is to say, nothing. Because when we had the chance to do something, we did nothing. So this meeting this evening is not about trying to tell Europe, okay, look, they owe us, they have a moral obligation to pay us reparations. But the first duty we have is indeed to ourselves.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gabe. Now, Crispin, on the other side of the coin, I mean, we're building this, we're doing the summits, we're talking about building relations with the continent, but what really are the opportunities that are there in terms of collaboration with the continent? Real opportunities for real collaboration with the continent, whether it's in environmental matters, in tourism, or it's in agribusiness. You know, of course, I mean, you've talked about it before, or relations with Western Sahara and Algeria, for example. So tell us a little bit more about the opportunities you see in tourism and so on, in terms of our relations that we can build with the continent.
Right. Well, you know, the continent is probably the world's last reservoir of all kinds of raw materials, and I think that the opportunities that present themselves is that some of the islands in the Caribbean will want to focus on who they could partner with on the continent. You have 54 countries. Not all of them are in the best of situations. I mean, you know, Sudan is in a civil war. South Sudan is in a civil war context. It hasn't blown out to real conflict, but it's close. Then you have rebels fighting in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So there are some unstable places on the continent, but there are countries that can help. I think of Nigeria, and one of the reasons I think of Nigeria, it's one of the countries. Well, it's clearly probably one of the most advanced economies on the continent, and we had a relationship with Nigeria back in the 90s during the government of Mary Eugenia Charles. And then succeeded by the government of Edison James. The relationship with Nigeria continued. I don't know why it discontinued, but it's certainly an arena, a relationship that can be rebuilt. I believe after Hurricane Maria, talking to the ambassador of Nigeria at the time to Algeria, because I had made a visit to Algeria then. And one of the things he said that they could certainly help Dominica is to become the cassava capital of the Caribbean. And the Nigerians have the capability of doing that. They are the largest producer of cassava in the world. They also produce a lot of cassava processing technologies, not only for making farine, what they call gari, but also for making cassava flour, for making feed for livestock, for cows from cassava, all of these things. The Nigerians are pretty advanced, and they have agricultural research institutes for every state in the country. And in addition to that, the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture is based in Nigeria. So I would say agriculture is certainly an arena where Africa countries can help the Caribbean with know-how, and then investment flows. There are a lot of rich people in Africa. Some of them made their money legitimately, others not so legitimately, but nonetheless, there are people who have money to invest in our region, and I'm happy that the Afrexim Bank is opening this office in Barbados, which will make it possible for countries to leverage loans from that bank. Then you have we got to set our sights on trade with Africa. You have the Africa Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum that presents opportunities for countries that can produce things that African continent can use. Of course, we in Dominica, we have all this water that's wasting, going to the ocean. We let 1 billion gallons of fresh water, which is one of the scarcest commodities on the planet, just go to the sea every day. There are African countries who could use that water in bottled form. Then, you know, there are things like possibilities for developing a perfume industry in Dominica. I mean, we were close to that, but when Hurricane Maria and Tropical Storm Erica came, they gave us a setback to the bay oil industry. But futuristically, I see the bay oil industry as producing perfumes, for example. And then it's not just those things that we want to also work with the African states on. We also want to do solidarity things with them to push their agenda in the world. I mean, the African countries and the Caribbean countries, we total 68 countries in the UN. And if we band together, we can achieve certain things. The Slavery Memorial at the UN was an initiative of the CARICOM countries, which was fully supported by the African countries, and we made it happen. The International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery was also an initiative of the CARICOM countries. I was the person who chaired that, and we were able to establish in the UN system the March 25th as the International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. So there are things that we can do together as the African countries and the Caribbean countries working hand in hand. So Sheridan, I think that there are opportunities. I should also mention the arena of music. We have two genres of music that we've developed over the last 40 years. Bouillon in recent times and Cadence Calypso before that, led by people like Gordon Henderson and the Mac brothers from Midnight Groovers. That music penetrated Africa. And some of our musicians have actually performed there, like Gordon Henderson, Exile One, and his band, and Gramax played on the continent. And don't forget Nacio Fontaine. He was correct. A big figure on the African continent. So we have the possibility to market our music in Africa. I mean, imagine one stadium in Nigeria can hold 70,000 people. That's the entire population of Dominica. Can you imagine our artists playing before 70,000 crowd at a stadium, or any one of these countries, whether it's in Congo, whether it's in Ivory Coast, whether it's in Ghana? So we have to begin to look at these cultural industry possibilities on the continent. And of course, there's a lot for us to learn from the Africans with cuisine, because a lot of our cuisine has its traditions on the African continent. I mean, all of the soups that we eat, those things come direct from that, from there. Okra soup, for example, and pepper soup and all of that. So there's that link. There's the connections that we will make with the continent. And then there's also the phenomenon in recent times of a lot of us have married spouses from the African continent. So we're seeing a whole renaissance that's happening, and I think it's all dynamic and important. And I want our young people to really begin to focus on the continent as a place that has a future for them, because the future of the world is really pointing to Africa. And we are the sixth region. We in the Caribbean, we are part of the sixth region of Africa. We happen to be the set of people who were brought in as enslaved Africans, but today we are states. We are the majority in the Caribbean countries of former enslaved Africans. And we are proud, and we have contributed to the continent. So we'll continue to contribute to the continent. My generation was probably the generation that started with the Black Power movement, and we're very active, and we continue to be active, and the reverence for Africa is strong and will remain strong. Now we want to make sure that goes to the next generation. I'm not as convinced that the next generation after me is not as embracing of these values, but we need to return there, because the future of the world is quickly turning to the African continent.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Crispin. Irving, I wanted to continue talking about opportunities in terms of collaboration with the continent, in terms of the natural resources that we have in Dominica, in terms of what, the disposition of the African countries, where the direction they're taking now, and then in the context of this summit that we have, and I imagine there will be another summit. What do we see going down the road in terms of another summit and looking at the opportunities for Dominica? Yeah, Irvin, you're not with us, or are you muted? Oh, I think Irving is probably dropped off a little bit there.
I'm trying to.
Okay, so you're back. You're back on.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Yeah. Well, I think you need bold leadership. You need to aggressively find out in what areas can we benefit from closer linkages to many African countries. We may have to think outside of the box, proverbial box. We may have to look beyond the
Irvin seems to be having some audio issues, so I don't know if he will come back in online in a minute, but maybe while we wait, Gable, maybe we can, Irving, you seem to have logged in somewhere else.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, but you're logged in two places now.
Yeah, well, go on to Higebo. I'll try to get rid of one of you.
Okay, excellent. Now, Gabe, on the same question that I put to Irving, I mean, where do you see the opportunities going forward?
Well, let me, before I forget, endorse what Brother Crispin talked about when he talked about Africa being the repository of all his minerals. But if the African governments are not careful, if they're as lawless as the government that we now confront on our island, they will lose all of that. Because there are certain rapacious nations to feed the industrial combine. If you're not careful in preserving what is yours, they'll come take it. Nature abhors a vacuum, you know. Nature abhors a vacuum. And so if you have weak institutions, you have a weak state, you have a weak civil defense, you have a weak military defense, your science and technology is not equipped to develop radar and means to defend what is yours, someone else will come and take it. I mean, I'm sad to say that while those of us who are Christians and are socialists have kind hearts, the history of human beings is that the human being is a predatory creature. And we are the ones who are trying to elevate, as Blessings likes to say, elevate us from the level of beast to the level of humanity. And the point I wanted to make was that I would send a challenge out to the government of Dominica tonight. And that's the challenge. If you're really serious, if you really care, why not ask all the people who come into the Creole Festival to take one day out and let's plant bamboo at the side of the rivers and plant some trees in the forest so we can prevent the washing away of our island into the sea. That is the challenge I sent to you, Roosevelt Skerrit. That is the challenge I sent to you, Minister of Tourism. That is the challenge I sent to you, Minister of Education. Why don't you then get out all our students in the college and our farmers to go on a national coup de main? And if you're serious, I will come down and plant my tree too. Those are the kind of meaningful things we must do. Because as I've said to people before, the Creole Festival must be transformed from what it is. It's a joke. You do 3 nights of mostly foreign artists, or local artists are going around with their mouth white because they're not getting sponsorship. And then at the end of the 3 days, what do you have to show for it but a hangover? But if we plant those trees, Crispin and I may not enjoy it, but our great-grandchildren will enjoy a country where our natural environment has been preserved. Mark you, I make the point about Christopher Maximin and those of his generation and the old forest guards. They laid the basis. People talk about Nature Island. It didn't happen as a result of someone dreaming and sitting down at the side of the road. It happened because folks went into the hinterland and they planted bamboo, they planted trees, they protected the environment. They penalized people who were cutting where they should not be cutting. They penalized people who are building where they should not be building. So that is the challenge that I sent. Pan-Africanism must mean that we go green. Because even in Africa itself, there's a lot they can learn from us about stewardship. Because you see pictures in Congo where they are mining gold and diamond and rare earth, lithium and so on. And it's terrible. It's like a moonscape. They've torn off all the trees, exposed the soil to the rains, and it's just a whole sea of mud. And people are working up to their waist in mud, producing minerals for the wealth of other countries in Asia and in the West. So a Pan-Africanist in the 21st century must not only be focused on science and technology, but must have a keen environmental consciousness. And that applies to Dominica first. Because before, of course, we love our African heritage and so on, but we have to protect what it is we have here now. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Gabe. Well, it's basically coming down to closing time. I mean, we've lost Irving. I hope he will be able to log back in before we move on. But Crispin, I want to go to you to give us your final remarks.
Yeah, well, I want to say that I applaud the where we are with the Africa CARICOM relationship. It augurs well for the future, and I'm glad that it's happening in this first quarter of this century, and it can only get better. I think the opportunity is there for the African countries to partner and pick and for countries to begin lining up with who they will partner with. Gone are the days when African countries offered the Caribbean help and it was not embraced. We had that particular situation with Dominica, where the Algerians offered Dominica help and Dominica never signed the agreement. That kind of behavior is not doesn't help our country. So it just tells me that the seriousness that our government should show to African countries, they certainly have not shown it in the past. So, but I think that the future looks good for a relationship with the continent, and hopefully our governments will embrace it and take it and run with it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Crispin. And Irvin, could you mute your mic? So Gabe Let me come to you for your closing remarks. Gabe?
Thank you very much, Mr. G. I just want to say how much it was a pleasure for me to be in the company of my brothers and, of course, the sisters online listening. We have taken the time to not forget our homeland, Dominica, and not forget the glory of our ancestors who fought for freedom to make Dominica a better place. And all that we do is predicated on one single thing, and that's love. The love we have for the land of our birth, and the love we also have of the land of our ancestry. But as I said earlier, we will not have much to contribute if we lose the land that we have now. You know, I'm reminded of the I guess, morality tale or the life lesson that was taught us at the Roseau Mixed Infant School. They taught us a lot of life lessons that are worth reminding. It was the dog with a bone, and the dog had the bone in its mouth, and it looked at the puddle, and it saw another dog with a bigger bone, so it dropped the one it had and jumped in. So we are firm Pan-Africanists. We love Africa, and we're committed to partnership. But the bone we have now is Dominica. You know, that's the country we have now. That's where we were born. And so if we want to talk about the pride we have in Africa, which is real and which is genuine, we must first consolidate the pride for the land of our birth. That's what a reasonable person will do under circumstances given to wisdom. And so the Pan-Africanists of the 21st century must not only be skilled in focusing on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and art as well, because art is important. Irvin and I, we put a few things together. Crispin has been himself an essayist and so on. And Mr. G, you've supported arts. But we also must be green Pan-Africanists. That is, we must understand that the planet that sustains us must be protected. And so, again, I put the challenge out to the government of Dominica. Let's green our island. Let's stop the cutting of the trees. Let's stop the wanton and reckless building without environmental impact studies, be it Chinese, Israelis, or whoever. A lot of these people have laid waste to their country and are now trying to fix their country. Let them not destroy ours. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gabe. Irving, your final word is yours. You need to unmute your mic.
All right. Thank you very much. Let me commend Gabriel and Crispin. They were batting with great panache and displaying a fine repertoire of various strokes in a fashion that would make the West Indies cricket team beg for more exposure. Let me thank you for hosting the program, Mr. G, Brother Lambie, and Brother Chauvin. Let me thank you for your human service to cause and country. I think we need more of you. I think with respect to the African mainland, it is perhaps one of the untapped resources that exists today. I think there is probably more mineral wealth in Africa as a continent than in any other continent in the world. The difficulty is that historically, the colonial authorities have played one ethnic group against the other, have usually corrupted every leader, or not every leader, but many leaders, has gotten rid of some, like Nkrumah in the early 60s, and others, not just in Africa, but in South America. So we have to try to forge partnerships, as Crispin has said so eloquently, with certain leaders in certain countries, because there's still a wealth of resources in Africa, not just minerals, but they can teach us something or two about housing. And one of the problems we face in Dominica is the astronomical price of building materials, housing design. And I think in many parts of Africa, there is an untapped resource that could come to our need in many ways. Many people in Dominica simply cannot afford the building materials. And that is exacerbated because there's no government policy which offers some relief to persons who are faced with the task of rebuilding after the hurricane, of trying to get ends meet, who do not have the benefit of having relatives abroad. So we have to strategically look at some of these things. In some African countries, you have a burgeoning fishing industry.
In some African countries, you have an industry where they break down ships and they resell the scrap metal from many of these ships, not just in Africa, but in other countries such as, for example, the Philippines and many others. So we have to look strategically at identified African countries and see how they could assist us, to see how they could help us develop a niche market, how they could enable us to develop a certain type of a market in a certain type of industry, a certain type of product development, how we can add value to whatever resources that we have. We cannot simply rely on selling our passports or selling our parrots to make $1. And it's out of that dollar generated, 70% goes in somebody's pockets. So how can you sustain a country with that type of philosophy of development? So yes, we have to identify our African countries to see how we can develop our people. But we also have to develop ourselves. We have to develop an architecture of governance. We have to develop an enabling environment based on honesty, based on decency, based on care for your fellow men and women, based on a scrupulous desire to improve and to develop your island, as opposed to lining your pockets. If we don't develop that philosophy, we can have relations with 100 African countries. Ain't going anywhere, my friend, because there will be no filtering down of the monies generated from those connections. There will be no multiplier effect. There will be, on the other hand, the shutting down of small businesses in Dominica, the increasing encroachment on your economy of persons from abroad, persons who don't pay taxes because they don't speak English too well, at least not when it comes to pay taxes. And they get away with it with impunity. Therein lies the problem. To the extent that you are rendered a foreigner in your own land, we can only dream of development. We can only dream of developing the human capital. And unless we shift that paradigm, unless we make that fundamental change to give every police officer, every nurse, every teacher, every public works worker, every small business owner, every professional, a belief that at least they are sharing in the wealth generated in their own country. Unless you can develop that type of mentality, then quite frankly, the future is dire indeed. But there is always hope when you have people like Crispin, you have like Gregoire, Lambie, Gabriel Christian, who at least have not lost hope. I wouldn't blame them if they had lost hope by now, but it's a measure of their own resilience that they are still of the belief that somehow things will change for the better. And I share that belief, although I haven't seen the horizon, quite frankly. But I know that one day it will come in all its glory, just like an innings from the great Vivian Richards. No disrespect to Lara and anybody else, but Vivian Richards. So, to all and sundry, to our listeners, to those who dream of a better world, a better island, one you can come in and relax. And I say continue dreaming, but sometimes you have to work towards transforming that dream into a reality. And that is what Dominica needs now, not more persons who have no interest in the island coming to the island pursuant to a freedom of movement, but Dominicans invited to come from every walk of life, from every corner of the world, to hold and establish and consolidate their stake in their own country, because quite frankly, they have to build generational wealth. It's increasingly more difficult to do that in the United States. So all the preconditions are there for you to focus your energies on Dominica. If you believe that your president in America will do it for you, in America's Zapedosa. But again, there is merit to the belief that Dominica should not just be a hope or a dream, but it should become a reality in our lives. And I certainly hope that it becomes more of a reality in my life, than it has always been. So, with those words, I thank you for inviting me, Mr. G. And again, I commend the panelists and those who made this program possible. And let us continue to fight the good fight. Let us emulate what this fellow has said, Luis, the human rights activist. Let us continue fighting the good fight, or let us continue making good trouble as opposed to bad ones. Thank you and good night.
Yeah, and thanks a lot. Excellent, excellent. I mean, the whole discussion tonight epitomizes a real standard of excellence. And I mean, I must say, I highly appreciated all of that came out of this discussion here tonight. So thank you, Irvin. Thank you, Gabe. Thank you, Crispin. Thank you, Lambi and Sherwin. Thank you, all of the persons who are with us on Facebook and on YouTube and on the radio and on the internet. Thank you so much for sticking with us tonight. Until next Tuesday on another topic of interest. So good night, everybody.
Good night.
Take care.
Take care.
The Global View on Q, the big station. Insights into where the people of Dominica and the Caribbean came from. Understanding our past. Embracing our present. Charting the way forward into our future. Together, eliminating poverty. Embracing